Welcome back to Something About Catholics with Ryan.
And I'm Jessie.
And today we're going to speak a little bit about the Feast of Christ the King, which we just went through. And I think you also had some things that you wanted to share about something that you recently attended over at our parish at St. Mark's.
Yes. Last week I went to a talk from Charles Fraune. He's an author who has many books if you want to look up any of them, but the most prominent one before the last, it seems, was Slaying Dragons. And he also has a publishing company now called Slaying Dragons. And that's what most things are published under, or Sophia Press. So the one that he was focusing more on for this talk was the most powerful saints in exorcisms. And I was both curious and a little bit nervous to go to the talk because as soon as I hear the word exorcisms, I'm like, okay, what am I in for?
Yeah, that stuff doesn't always sit well with me. And I think part of the reason is that I have an interest in it. And I know sometimes when you have an interest or curiosity about something like that, it isn't necessarily a good thing. So I also feel like I'm very sensitive to that type of topic. And I don't know what I'd be exposing myself to if I went to something like that. So I understand your trepidation.
But from my perspective, you also seem to have a spiritual gift where you can sense things that I do not possess. I think I can feel people's emotions, but I don't know necessarily where they're coming from, if it's the spiritual world or if it's someone in front of me. And I think you often can pinpoint things a little bit better than I can, a lot better than I can.
Well, if it's a gift, then sometimes it's a blessing and then other times it's a curse. So haven't quite figured out how to navigate that just yet.
Exactly. And our parish pastor was there as well. And part of me wondered if it was a double-sided attendance where he might have been curious and then also just, hey, let me protect my people that are attending kind of thought. But it ended up being more hopeful than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more like spiritual warfare, dark topic kind of things. And I just wanted to share some of the interesting, hopeful parts. And he was...
So who gave the...
Charles Fraune.
Charles Fraune.
D. Fraune is how it is on the front of this book that I'm looking at.
And who is he?
He's an author and he's interviewed many different exorcists that the Catholic Church recognizes. So the most recent book, The Most Powerful Saints in Exorcisms, has a lot of question and answers from those more prominent exorcists that are also priests in the Catholic Church. So it's like a question and answer portion and then a history portion in the book as well.
So is he at St. Mark's because he is promoting a new book that has just come out?
Yeah, I don't know if they brought him in or if he just reached out or if his people reached out to a bunch of different parishes. I don't know how that worked, but so he also has maybe a devotion or a calling to publish more things about St. Alphonsus Liguori. And I didn't know very much about that saint at all. I think he was alive in the 1600s and that he had a rough life. But he had shared, if anyone's listening, that his biography can be quite consoling if you've had a lot of suffering in your own life. So I am also curious to check it out for that reason. He said toward the end of his life, he could not lift his head off of his chest due to arthritis. And if he wanted to say mass, somebody had to support it with a chair so that he could get through the mass.
Wow.
So that's an immense amount of suffering. And for him to push through that for God, for the glory of God, was amazing to me. St. Alphonsus Liguori also had a devotion to St. Teresa of Avila, and she would often intercede for him when he would ask her. And there's a prominent exorcist, Father Amorth, who says that saints are assassins on the spiritual warfare front for us.
I like that they would be considered on the forefront there of doing that. Now, Father Amorth, you know why he is significant, right?
I just know him from his YouTube videos of being like a very prominent exorcist.
Right. So Father Amorth is significant not only to Catholics, but to non-Catholics in some way, shape, or form, because William Friedkin took a special interest in Father Amorth and actually made a documentary with him a couple of years back. But the reason that William Friedkin, who's a director, did that was because William Friedkin in the mid-70s directed The Exorcist. And of course, The Exorcist is based on...
That was part of this talk too. I thought that was fascinating.
So that's Father Amorth. That's where that story comes from.
So was he the exorcist during the real story of what happened?
I believe so, and that's why William Friedkin, many years later, who wasn't Catholic, found some interest in talking to Father Amorth about whether or not, exorcisms are real. You have to remember that one of the interesting things about the film The Exorcist is that it was written by William Peter Blatty, who is a Jesuit and was actually studying to be a priest at one point and decided not to become a priest and instead became kind of a playwright and mostly wrote comedies. But The Exorcist was one of the books that he wrote. And when it got brought into Hollywood, he didn't ultimately direct it. William Friedkin directed it with William Peter Blatty writing the screenplay. But nonetheless, to kind of bring this back, it is based on, I believe, some of what Father Amorth went through, if not mistaken. And again, William Friedkin to kind of bring things back to, I don't want to say planet Earth, but maybe to satisfy his own curiosity, actually made a documentary with Father Amorth.
Well, now I want to see that. I'm very curious. Did you watch it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
No, for the same reason that I was a little bit frightened of going to that talk.
Maybe we should watch it together. I have not seen The Exorcist, the film. I think someone had it on around me and I was like, I can't do this. I can't watch it. But hearing about the actual story was interesting too. And I cannot recall it perfectly, so I won't go into it too much, but it sounded like it was an honest mistake by the man that it was actually about, where he had a prominent aunt that he just loved and adored, and that aunt showed him ways to talk to what she just thought was the spiritual world, and it just continued on from there. Where she passed away, he wanted to communicate with her, and he would use things like the Ouija board, not thinking that anything else would come through, but just that he would be talking to his aunt. And I just think that that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, because sometimes we can be doing things that we think are perfectly fine, perfectly come from good intentions, and then not so great things can come from that if we don't know the origins of stuff like the Ouija board.
Well, that's one of the significant things about that film, The Exorcist, is that it is a family, a single mother and a little girl. And I know there are folks out there have kind of put the onus on the film as kind of an allegory to a girl hitting puberty and beginning to go through becoming a teenager. But I think given the fact that it has been written by a Jesuit and took into account some actual real life scenario that had occurred with an exorcism, I do think that there's more to it. And I think simply calling it an allegory about puberty is kind of doing it a disservice. And I think it also is worth stating that it's one film that I don't revisit. I don't own it. I think it's an excellent film. I think it has a great conclusion. And I think it has a very Catholic conclusion, but it's a film that really stuck with me. I saw it in college and it really scared me.
Yeah.
And there's just things in the film that I don't ever want to see again that stuck with me for a long time after the fact. So
Makes sense. I am okay not seeing it, but knowing that it's important and that it probably opens a lot of people's eyes to what can happen from a theatrical and real point of view.
I also just really quickly wanted to say that the documentary that William Friedkin made, just pulled that up here on the side. It was made in 2017. It's called The Devil and Father Amorth. And it was a documentary about the ninth exorcism of an Italian woman in the village of Altri, referred to as Christina. And it was Father Amorth who performed said exorcism.
Interesting. So the overall message of what I went to was that the devil wants to destroy us, but we're actually born for the fight, and how the saints can help us from heaven. One of the messages was that they actually begin their work in heaven. They're fully alive in heaven, and they have endured and conquered temptations of this life. There was a focus on what we talked about in the past episode that we did together on the Triduum, and a reminder that we on earth are the church militant, and then that there's the church suffering, the holy souls in purgatory, and the church triumphant are the saints. And they want us to talk to them and to ask for their intercession. Charles Fraune pointed out that St. Alphonsus Liguori says that they can pray for us after we pray for them. And that goes for both the saints and the holy souls in purgatory. So after they're able to exit purgatory and enter into heaven, they can then pray for us. It's a good reminder of that. And then I thought it was interesting that they both, Charles Fraune and St. Alphonsus Liguori, both point out that the saints lament how much we ignore them. And sometimes they'll do things like put things in our path repeatedly, and we'll be like, why is this happening? For us, one of the examples was they'll drop a holy card in your path to try to get your attention sometimes. Thought that was interesting. And just what's happening in exorcism shows the powers of the saints. And then during the liturgical year, we can recognize that it pivots around the feast of the saints every day. There's a feast for a saint. Exorcists will often choose days for an exorcism based on saints pitted against certain demons, if they know their name or they ask for their intercession. Sometimes they'll ask for the help of a patron saint of a person during an exorcism. They also pointed out, just as an aside, on the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, the final blessing, to listen to it, you receive special graces during that. And then the first thing that an exorcist does in an exorcism is to say the litany of the saints. You knew that, but I didn't.
You want to call on all of the most powerful people in order to aid you when something like that is happening. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Thought it was cool. The way it was described was saying the church triumphant is here, the church militant is here, and not just ask the saints for prayer, but it's like saying this person beat you, and this one, because there's quite a few saints in that litany, and reminding the devil that he's already been beaten and you're about to lose this fight too, and that this person is about to come back to Christ and the church. And they also pointed out we do not choose which saints help us, only God does. An exorcist can use relics and place them on the forehead of the person who's possessed. They'll often use the person's baptismal name, their patron saint's name or any connection that they have had in the past to any saint. Oh, I thought the part that Charles Fraune mentioned about when he had spoken with prominent exorcists, he had said, "What saints do you see showing up?" And he said that they relayed that they don't actually see with their eyes the saints. It's usually the person who's possessed will look over and see one of the saints, and they'll start describing them or have a conversation with them. And that's how that gets relayed. And then another question was how or what saints are most prominent. And a lot of the answers were like St. John Paul II and more modern saints like St. Carlo Acutis, Padre Pio, Gemma Golgoni. And the thought process behind that was maybe that is that they are a fresh wound in the devil's side, not necessarily that any saint is more powerful than another for any reason. It's just that's more of a fresh wound for the devil.
It's wild that they would sit there and talk to the saints. But again, I think this is kind of like where I go in the opposite direction of people that, like, when we talk about movies and we talk about movies about possession and things like that and why I'm sensitive to it. I think it's the one type of film that I see that's separate from just a horror movie. I can't sit there and say it's makeup. It's just because the fact of the matter is, even if you don't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
it's the kind of thing that like believes in you. And I think that is a very
Sinister.
scary and sinister thing to consider.
Yeah, it is. Oh, and then one of the other examples, so Father Rippinger, another exorcist, said that one of the examples that he would see through a possessed person was that person may see Saint Joseph with his staff, and every time that he slammed his staff into the ground, the person who was possessed, when they were in that possessed state, would shudder each time it was slammed down. Also mention about how, I already shared this with you, but I just thought it was cool. Saint Joseph is a super saint. And people in the crowd were like, why is Saint Joseph a super saint? And some of the reasons are just that he was united with the Virgin Mary by marriage. He shared in her exalted dignity. He's the foster father of Christ, and he was given all the gifts to raise him well. So we should reach out to him when we need a father figure or that super saint. There was also an example from our parish pastor who said someone had seen what seemed to be described as Saint Joseph during possession / deliverance that she was going through. And I guess her father, he was talking about father wounds that can happen sometimes and an interest in that. And apparently she had been trafficked by her father, and her father died before they could come to any sort of forgiveness between each other. But apparently her father had a conversion of faith before he died, separately from her. So then she was working on herself, and she couldn't get past the unforgiveness. And the way that our priest described it was that unforgiveness can be a wall against deliverance. And I guess at one point when she and a priest were working on this, she saw what she described as an old man with a staff walk through the door.
Wow.
And then he said nothing, but he just turned to the side, and then her father walked through the door and sat in a chair in front of her. And the priest watched her have a conversation with like no one that he can see, but she could see someone. And the thought of that is it's the most prominent father figure, Saint Joseph.
Right.
leading in her dad so that they could come to a place of reconciliation together.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty powerful.
That is neat.
I wondered if the woman was not Catholic herself. I wanted to know more about that story, but I don't.
But we don't know.
Because no, we don't know. The description of a man, an older man with a staff walking in and not saying anything. I thought that was interesting. There's things out there. I didn't know this. I was wondering if you knew this about Obi-Wan Kenobi being modeled after St. Padre Pio.
I did not know that, but when you say it, and I can picture Alec Guinness in my head,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, that is neat. I had no idea. Where did that come from?
It was just like in talking about the saints. Apparently Saint Dominic, before he died, said that he would be more useful where he was going to the people around him that were sad that he was suffering and then going to die. And apparently Saint Therese of Lisieux said the same thing. Like, don't cry for me. I'm going to be more useful where I'm going. And I can't picture how Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, but apparently there's a quote that's very similar to, like, don't cry for me. I'm going to be more useful where I'm going. Do you know?
Yeah, he gives up to Darth Vader at the end of the film, and he lets himself be struck down, and he says something along the lines of, you can strike me down, but I'll come back twice as powerful.
That's what they were equating the quotes from Saint Therese of Lisieux and Saint Dominic to in the talk.
He says, and I quote, if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
That's cool, because a couple of the saints have said things like that before they die.
Then he does. I mean, that's kind of a catalyst for the remainder of the series, because he comes back and continues to console Luke. But I mean, you could say that about all of the Jedi that were surround Luke. Like when you talk about Force ghosts, or those ghosts that appear different spots throughout the trilogy. That's exactly what that is.
Need to watch it more with this in mind.
We will if they ever decide to release the theatrical cuts.
The last part that I thought was really interesting was that the relics of saints that are used, there were a lot of questions from people who came to the talk about that, and they were like, why are relics used? All of the above kind of questions. And apparently there's an order of sisters in Rome that's in charge of the relics of saints. And Father Putnam, with a laugh, said that you used to be able to go in and say what you wanted, and they would open like a drawer or an area and say, here you go, for like different parts or relics or pieces of saints. Mm-hmm. And now it's a lot more controlled. But the thought process with exorcisms being more powerful with relics from the saints is just that the saints are still very aware of where all their body parts are in the world, and that they can connect to that and help in a more tangible way when those are used.
I didn't know that.
So
I don't know how I'd feel about knowing that my body was all over the place.
No.
Probably not good.
You and I have talked a couple times about, like, how did this person's body part get here? Why does this body, like, did they cut it off? Did they, how does this one get to go on tour?
I know a number of priests that have a number of relics. So it is interesting when you think about the fact that that's what it is.
Yeah.
It actually comes from a person. Although I think there's also the secondary relics, and we should do an entire discussion on relics, because
yes,
I think you can have relics that have been touched to people or to saints or to holy relics. There's like a secondary relic type categorization.
Yes.
So
first, second, and third degree. I said that was the last thing, but okay, one more thing. on authority and power, the accumulation of merits. So if we are suffering willingly in this life, there was a lot of talk of storing up merits in heaven. And I want to research that more as well, because you and I have suffered a lot and continue to. And the idea of there being things that I can't even see until I, by the will of God, make it to heaven someday, being there for me and all of it making more sense, and almost like the visual image of there being treasure there that I'm storing up was helpful to me. And then last part, that St. John Paul II specifically evangelized the youth, and that the demons especially hate that. And they feel those merits and it actually hurts them. And that's been communicated to the exorcists that are working with possessed people. And it's interesting because I've seen a couple of things lately with our current Pope Leo, like with the youth conference that just happened, communicating with the youth. And it just feels important that younger people growing up are hearing from people like Pope Leo saying how important they are and will be going forward. So yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's why my mind is a little boggled by the fact that we are eroding some of the tradition that's been put into place, specifically around our diocese. And I continue to see it in a lot of the Catholic news and podcasts that I partake in, but probably a story for another day.
It's hard, but it's also a reminder of what we really have, our relationship with God and prayer versus what's tangible in this world and can change at any moment.
Right.
And it's frustrating when it changes for what we feel like is a persecutorial or...
I think erode is a good term. You build something up and then it erodes, and then what are you left with?
Yeah.
Especially if the thing that brings younger folks in is the tradition, is the rich Catholic tradition.
Makes sense. Does that kind of lead to what you wanted to talk about with Christ the King, or no?
Yeah, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I found this interesting. And part of the reason that I found it interesting is in the homily, it's one of those things that I've referred to time and time again as we continue to speak together. You hear something many, many, many times. And on occasion, you'll hear... There's a person that I work with probably said it better than I can ever say it. And it's sometimes you need to hear something 7 different times, 7 different ways. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Well, I'm almost 40 years old. How many times have I gone through the Feast of Christ the King? But never once have I ever thought or considered the fact that the Feast of Christ the King comes in the tail end of November, right before Christmas, right before the end of the year. And it's so odd to have a feast day that is so significant, especially because of what it's about, occur towards the end of the year. You would think it would be maybe towards the beginning of the year to kind of signify that Christ rules over everything. But instead we kind of save it till the end of the year, and it's really weird. So let me start out just by saying that the Feast of Christ the King is a Catholic solemnity, and it celebrates Jesus as the sovereign King of the universe, of all creation, of every nation, of every human heart. The feast day is meant to emphasize Christ's kingship as not an earthly kingship, right? So it's not based on any kind of power or wealth. It's rooted in truth. It's rooted in love, service. We consider his throne, the cross, and his crown that of thorns. And so this feast, it's interesting because it proclaims the universal lordship of Christ over all things, right? Individuals, families, societies, governments, everything, anything that exists. It should remind us as Catholics that all earthly authority is subordinate to Christ and must be exercised according to his law.
I thought the priest that we were with last night explaining, if Christ isn't the king of your heart, just ponder what is.
Right.
I've been thinking about that all day today.
Yeah.
Since that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great. His homily probed a lot of this and kind of like planted little seeds in my mind. So, it's also celebrated, like I said, at the end of the year. More specifically, the final Sunday before Advent. I know this is going to sound crazy because Advent begins next week, but it is the final Sunday before Advent. And if you take a step back and kind of look at it from that perspective, it's kind of a culmination of the whole year and point towards the second coming when Christ's kingship will fully be revealed, right? And I guess it's the 23rd of November this year. In 2026, it's going to be the 22nd. Just a brief history, right? It was established by Pope Pius XI in 1925 with the encyclical Quas Primas, in response to the rise of atheistic communion, aggressive secularism, and extreme nationalism after World War I. Pope Pius XI wanted to reassert that only Christ is the true King and Prince of Peace. It was originally celebrated on the last Sunday of October. Pope Paul VI moved it in 1970 to the last Sunday of the liturgical year and raised it to the rank of a solemnity. So when we think about, the Feast of Christ the King, these are some of the interesting aspects of it. I think the last thing that I would say about it, and something else that kind of struck me, is being that it is kind of towards the end of the year, it does give the liturgical year an eschatological bookend. You can think of it as almost ending the year, not with a whimper, but with one of those triumphant bangs that we speak of. That history is moving forward towards the full establishment of Christ's kingdom. And it's best said by Philippians 2, verses 10 through 11, where every knee shall bow. So I just wanted to draw a little bit of attention to that because it just happened. And I thought that the homily last night about where it winds up in the liturgical year and why it's important to reflect on, and the fact that being that it's at the end of the year really should give us kind of a reflection of, everything that's happened this year. None of it is, it's all grounded in earthly things. None of it is grounded in what awaits us in heaven should we get there, in Christ's kingdom in heaven.
Yeah. And
I just found that to be very, very interesting, especially when you consider everything that's happened during the year.
That is interesting.
So,
and if he hadn't have pointed it out, I would have just blindly kept going and not thought any different of it. I probably just would have pictured baby Jesus on Christmas.
Yep. Same with me.
King.
Thought it was interesting. So,
eschatological was also a word you said, and if anybody else doesn't know it, like I didn't know it, it is relating to death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul. Just for your word of the day.
All important things, in my opinion.
It was my word of the day.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
No.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time with more.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.